Hello and welcome back, and today I want to do another before you buy, but this time I want to talk about 10 gigabit Ethernet. Now for those that aren't aware, 10G or 10 GBE or 10 gigabit Ethernet, whatever you want to call it, is very much a thing now. Around about a decade ago, it was one of those things that a lot of people couldn't even touch unless they are in some sort of high-powered business position or were dealing with massive amounts of data, like data centers and more, that needed that amount of throughput on all of their data and the bandwidth so they could enjoy it. But 10GB has come down in price significantly over the last few years. So today I want to help you guys decide whether you should make the jump into 10GB. Again, it's 5 points that I think you guys should bear in mind before you go ahead and start investing in 10GB equipment. So point number one, price. Let's talk about the price of it. Now, 10GBE has come down in price as mentioned. It used to be that a 10G setup, even the most modest, would cost thousands and thousands of pounds, but now you can get away with it in the hundreds. For example, upgraded 10GBE, so single port 10G cards, knock around for as little as 80 quid. There's some pretty decent ones with nice heat sinks there that will go for about 120, but upgrading a desktop PC to 10GBE, again, you can get away with, give or take, about 100 to 120 quid, including the tax. Then you've got adapters for, devices that aren't big towering PCs, so laptops like these. If you've got a Thunderbolt device, you can connect a Thunderbolt to 10GBE device for, again, around about 150 to 170 pounds, thanks to a range of 10GBE to Thunderbolt adapters out there from companies like QNAP and Sonnet. Then you've got 2-port cards. These are cards that have got two 10GB ports on the rear. They knock around for about 150 to 200 quid, and they're available not only from NAS brands like Synology and QNAP, but there's also third-party companies, Mellanox, Intel, that sort of thing. There's lots of cards out there, and a lot of that is thanks to companies like Aquantia producing drivers and chipsets and transistors for the PCB that are significantly more affordable these days than they've ever been before. And the drivers that allow you to have access to 10GBE on these SoCs, these software on chip processors, have allowed 10GBE to rocket downwards in price. But in order to enjoy 10GBE in a far more spread fashion across multiple devices, maybe you've got a NAS and multiple users enjoying that, then it's worth highlighting you're going to need a 10G switch, and that is where the money really is. That's where you will end up spending money, because although all the components we've talked about are knocking around for like 80 to 200 quid on the top end there to upgrade a system to 10GBE, for a whole network you're going to need a switch, and they start at about 100 to 130, 40 quid for some low-end 10G, and generally that's going to be a switch that's got a bunch of 1GBE ports and one, maybe two 10GBE ports, just a token little gesture there. That's for a kind of hybrid network, but if you're going to wholesale upgrade all the connections, you are looking 500 to a grand for a multi-port 10G switch. So again, the price of 10GB, although it has come down significantly, and I have mentioned it in other videos, bear in mind it's still going to be 3 to 5 times the cost of a standard 1GBE network upgrade setup across your system. The next thing to bear in mind with 10GBE is, of course, what kind you're going to utilise, because network Ethernet, when it reaches outside of the boundaries of 1GBE in the way that we're quite used to with standard CAT cables like the ones hanging there in the background, it's worth highlighting that 10GBE predominantly arrives in two different versions, copper and fibre, or 10G base T or SFP+. These are the two different variants of cabling that are utilised to pass files via the 10GBE bandwidth, the 10G, 1000 megs, between different devices. But bear in mind, they have their own pros and cons. Copper, we're very familiar with. If you use standard 1 gigabit Ethernet LAN cables, you're already using copper there. So if all your devices have got that interface, or you're going to be doing a mixed 10 and 1G setup, copper's probably going to be the one for you. But just bear in mind that 10G cables, although considerably more affordable, it's worth highlighting that those cables, once you reach about 15-20 meters, the latency, in other words, the amount of time it takes for things to get done and passed through, will start to rise, and that's where copper kind of reaches its limitations at 10G. You can counter this with better quality cabling with Cat6 and Cat7 cables. 10G, I would always recommend Cat6 and no lower. But When it comes to greater distances, that is where fiber lives. SFP Plus, this is a variant of Ethernet cabling. It's not even really Ethernet. That allows you to cover huge expansive distances thanks to fiber optic cabling that allows data to be transmitted with very, very low latency. But bear in mind that fiber, because it's designed for such long distances, that cabling does make up the majority of the cost of an installation. They don't immediately slot in the same way you used to with Cat6, with the cable just going straight into that Cat cable connection. With fiber optic cabling and SFP, you need to have a transceiver on the end there. That transceiver goes into the back of your NAS, your switch, your device, and then the cabling slots into it to cover that large expanse of distance, because users have such bespoke and customized network environments, and the layout, the physical layout, both within a building and between multiple sites changes. This fiber optic cabling is generally very customizable in length, and therefore those prices start to skyrocket. And don't forget the little transceivers too. You can counteract that with something called DAC cables, direct attach cables, DAC. But those cables generally won't go higher than about 5 to 7 meters, and they've got transceivers already pre-attached. But again, the minute you're looking at that sort of distance, you should really be looking at traditional copper cabling there. So between the two of them, you do have the more affordable but shorter range cables in copper, and fiber being the overall more expensive but covers a greater deal of distance, so do bear that in mind. Next, this one's more of a tip for people that are going to be utilizing 10GBE across one or more devices, and that is MTU, or jumbo frames, or jumbo packets. It comes by very many different names, but the majority of 10GBE network compliant devices will support it. Now, jumbo frames again, MTU and all the different names, generally you'll watch whenever I do any video that involves 10GBE, I will go into the network settings of the PC, or I'll go into the network settings of a NAS, and I will adapt to jumbo frames or MTU from the traditional auto or 1500 all the way up to 9000. That is because with every packet of data that goes across, you want to have as many frames as possible, and the packets within that frame as possible. So consequently, it's the equivalent of handing over a leaflet compared with handing over a book. Every single frame that goes across, you want to have as many packets as possible. So for example, at 1500 being less than 9000, it means that less packets of data are being handled each time. And that is why if you're going to utilize 10GBE, I almost always recommend that you go into the network settings of the PC, the Mac, the NAS, or whatever compliant device, go into the network settings and find the option for jumbo frames or jumbo packets or MTU, and set it to 9000, the current maximum for that kind of network connection. So bear that in mind, give that a go, and it will improve your performance. And we have done it in speed tests before to give ourselves basically a better range of result, but bear in mind that it's still going to be very dependent on the devices at either end of that 10G connection to know the overall speed and performance you are going to get. Speed and performance actually leads us very well into our next point, which is saturation. Now, this is very, very important. Saturation, and I'm not talking a sponge in a bucket cleaning your car. I am talking about how you fill that 1000 megs bandwidth that you've created. Bear in mind that just because you can fill up to 1000 megs per second throughput between these two devices when transmitting data doesn't mean you're going to get it. And in order to saturate that connection, you have to make sure that the device at either end can send and receive that amount of data. Case in point, if you notice a number of NAS devices that have got 10GBE, you'll notice that very, very few NAS devices that have got less than 4 bays have 10GBE. There's only about 2 to my mind. There's an Asustor NAS, the AS40 series, and there is the TerraMaster F2 422. Those are the only 2 10GBE 2 bays that I know of by default. You can upgrade them, but the reason is that 2 drives will almost certainly, even if they are SATA SSDs, they will likely not give you 1000 megs. So you won't be able to fill that 1000 megabytes per second connection between these two devices. So in order to saturate a 10G connection, bear in mind that you are going to have at least enough media, so at least 4 hard drives of enterprise level in a RAID 5 or utilizing SSDs. That is the only way you're going to get that kind of performance from a 10G NAS. Like for like at the other end, if you are pulling data from a device onto your localized PC, your Mac, your whatever, bear in mind that your internal SSD or hard drive, NVMe or otherwise, make sure the drive you're writing to has enough performance. Otherwise, you might be pulling from a NAS that's got 12 hard drives, all of them fully populated in a RAID 5. So you're getting 1,000 potential, but if your host system doesn't have an internal drive that can write higher than 1,000, it's no good. You're not going to receive it. So when it comes to saturation, remember the destination device and the receiving device and the sending device, both of them have to have the potential for 1,000 megs. Otherwise, you're just wasting all that bandwidth in the middle because you're never going to be able to saturate and fill it. Finally, this is a lesser known one about 10GBE, and this goes specifically to users and networks out there that are going to have mixed network environments that feature not only 10GBE upgraded machines, but also feature 1GBE, 2.5GBE, and 5GBE connections. Not all 10G upgrade cards are created equally, and a lot of the time we have seen a lot of network adapters. It's becoming less and less common now thanks to those Aquantia drivers that we mentioned, but there's a lot of 10G hardware out there that doesn't have auto switching, and that's very important. It's a term that's thrown around whenever you see the specifications of a 10G device. You'll generally blank out the majority of it because a lot of the protocol in the background is so high-end tech and assumes that you have it in place anyway, they'll rarely read it. But if you don't have auto packet exchange, there's a chance that your upgrade card that you see that's very, very budget, we're seeing some 50 and 60 quid 10G cards out there, the super budget ones, they don't support auto switching. The result is that you can't utilize it for anything but 1G and 10G, which will be a problem if you are connecting mid-range performance devices in the middle. Likewise, with a 10G connection shared by a NAS that's putting a full 1,000 megs through to a switch that's shared out with devices, a lot of the time, if you've got you've bought budget 10G cards or budget 10G appliances that don't have that negotiation, that auto negotiation between those different protocols, then if you can't get to 10, you're automatically bottlenecked to 1. So make sure you double check that it's got auto switching on your 10G devices before you buy them. Because although you might have a full 10G environment across your office or home environment, having auto switching is just a small extra thing that I think a lot of people don't realise they need until they wonder why they're not getting 1,000 megs here. And they're testing and testing and testing and bottlenecking at 100 megs. And that's a big reason for that. But this has been 5 important points that I think you need to know before you buy 10GBE networking equipment. If you agree, let me know. If there's a point I've missed, I can always do a follow-up video, so do let me know in the comments. Click like if you've enjoyed the video, click subscribe to learn more, and I'll see you next time.